You got to swipe left or right. I don't know. But when you think about what he did and created the fertilizer process that we all enjoy and eat from every day, um, he was a German nationalist first and foremost, even though he was a Jew.
Oh,
And he
shit, over
personally
there,
went to
dude.
witness the application of ammonia and chlorine gas applied during trench warfare in 1916 in battles in Brussels and whatever. And they had a whole cadre of Nobel laureates in chemistry and physics that would go and witness these atrocities. But that was
Who's in trouble?
Almost putting science above, I don't want to say human dignity, but of the fact that he would later be suppressed, and actually some of his relatives would die in Auschwitz because of the chemical that he invented, also called Zyklon B. And so it's just unbelievable. So I feel like that does have resonance today in this worship of science, and listen to science and follow the science, which is more like scientism. And there is still a danger. I always say, just because you're an atheist doesn't mean you don't have a religion. Just because you in my case, in my books, I talk a lot about the Nobel Prize. It's kind of like a kosher idol. It's something that you can worship. It doesn't do any harm, and we want those people that are so significant in their intellectual accomplishments, because there is a core of America and the Western world in general that does worship and really look at science, predominantly because it gives us technology. But there's something really cool about that. And so for me, it's hard to find that balance point between looking to science for wisdom, which I don't think it has. They're two different words. But also recognizing how much good and transformative power, maybe our only hope, comes from science.
You opened so many doors, because you also bring up our Ernest Becker in that book. So there's a lot of elements of religiosity to science and to the Nobel Prize. It's fascinating to explore, and we will. And we still haven't finished the discussion of the beginning of the universe, which we'll return to. But now, since you opened the book, wow, pun unintended, of losing the Nobel Prize, can you tell me the story of BICEP, the background imaging of cosmic extragalactic polarization experiment, BICEP 1 and BICEP 2, and then maybe you can talk about BICEP 3. But the thing that you cover in your book, the human story of it, what happened?
Yeah, that book is in contradistinction to the second book. That's like a memoir. It's really a description of what it's like to feel, what it feels like to be a scientist, and to come up with the ignorance, uncertainty, imposter syndrome, which I cover in a later book in more detail. But to really feel like you're doing something, and it's all you think about. It is all consuming, and it's something I couldn't have done now because I have too many other wonderful, delightful demands on my time. But to go back to that moment when I was first captivated by the night sky as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, and really mixed together throughout my scientific story has always been wanting to approach the greatest mystery of all, which I think is the existence or non-existence of God. So I call myself a practicing agnostic. In other words, I do things that religious people do, and I don't do things that atheist people do. And I once had this conversation, my first podcast guest, actually. I shouldn't say, I was just having a conversation with Freeman Dyson. But he was actually my first guest. Yeah. And I miss him.
Name drop.
Name drop, yes. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of comments.
So in case people don't know, Brian Keating is the host of Into the Impossible podcast, where he's talked to some of the greatest scientists in the history of science, physicists, especially in the history of science.
So when I talked to Freeman, I said, Freeman, you call yourself an agnostic too. Can you tell me something like what do you do on Sundays? You go to church. He's like, no, I don't go to church. And I'm like, well, imagine there was like an intelligent alien, and he was looking down, or she was I don't know. Thing was looking down, and it saw Freeman. And on Sundays, like a group of people go to church, but Freeman doesn't go to church. And then there's another group of people that don't go to church, and those are called atheists. But Freeman calls himself an agnostic, but he does the things that like Richard Dawkins. He doesn't go to the same church that Richard Dawkins doesn't go to, right? So I said, how would you distinguish yourself if not practice? So I'm a behaviorist. I believe you can change your mentality. You can influence your mind, your bodily, physical actions. So when I was a 12-year-old, I got my first telescope. I was actually an altar boy in the Catholic Church, which is kind of strange for a Jewish kid who grew up in New York. Maybe we'll get into that, maybe not. But I was fascinated by these.
Can we get into it for a second?
Okay, yeah.
So much
young,
sad.
young Brian, the new sitcom on CBS. Young Brian, born to
You
two
just
Jewish
don't know who to
parents.
believe anymore.
My father was a professor at Sydney Stony Brook. He's a mathematician, eminent mathematician. And my mother was an eminent mom and brilliant English major,
Different
etc.
directions all the time.
And they raised us, but they were secular. They we'd go to, I always joke, we'd go to synagogue, 2 times a year, on Christmas and Easter. No, we would go, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, right? That's the typical 2-day year Jews. And we'd have matzahs once a year and Passover, and that was about it. And for years I was like that until my parents got divorced. My mother remarried, and she married an Irish Catholic man by the name of Ray Keating. My father's name is James Sanders.
Wow.
So when she remarried Ray Keating,
I'm skin tired.
I was immediately adopted. I'm actually adopted into the Keating family. And he had 9 brothers and sisters, and just Mormon various. They, did Christmas, Easter. It was one of the most wonderful experiences I had. And I do things
Laughing, cracking up, jokes,
whatever I do, I want to take it over. So to me, that meant really learning about Christianity, in this case Catholicism. So I was baptized, confirmed, and I said, I want to go all the way.
being a stupid.
In the Catholic Church.
And being a
You're gonna be
stupid.
the best altar boy there ever was.
Yeah.
I had like
Stupid,
serious
man.
skills. You pass that collection basket. I
No
could push people
piensa
to get them to 2x their
ya.
contributions. But in this case, I was 13. Now, I don't know if you remember, when you were 13. But if you extrapolate the next level up, it's like graduate student, postdoc, professor. The next level up from confirmation, altar boy is priest. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but priests are not entitled to have relations with women. And as a 13-year-old boy, kind of like future casting what life's going to be like for myself if I continue on my path, I found it. Maybe
The math came that up.
That's right. There was a serious gap in that future. And instead, when I should have been preparing for my bar mitzvah, as most Jewish boys would do, if they're 12, 13-year-old boy, I actually got a telescope and became infatuated with all the things you could see with it. It's bigger than that one over there that your hedgehog's looking through. Is that hedgehog?
It's a hedgehog in the fog. I should mention, and we'll go one by one these things. You've given me some incredible gifts. Here's a place to ask about the telescope that put some clamps on and let the hedgehogs look. And using.
Now you're officially an experimental astrophysicist.
Why experimentalist versus an engineer?
Because you assembled this telescope, you gave it a mount, and you connected it to a very.
Yeah, but there's no experiment going on. It's just engineering for show.
Okay.
It's very shallow. So experiment is taking it to the next level and actually achieving something. Here, I just built a thing for show.
Well, that's always people say, "Oh, you're an experimental cosmologist." I'm like, "Yeah, I build a lot of universes." Most of my time is putting clamps on things, soldering things. It's not actually doing the stroking of my non-existent beard, contemplating the cyclic versus the bouncing cosmological.
Yeah, and just like most of robotics,
Me too,
it's
same.
Velcro for things.
Right. Yeah. It's not like having dancing dogs and whatever. Right? So telescope.
Yes, this telescope. What's the story of this little
So
telescope?
this telescope's a very precious thing. In some ways, it's a symbol of what got me into, what brought me all the blessings I have in my life. Came from a telescope. And I always advise parents, or even people for themselves, you right here, wherever we are, in the biggest city on earth, Manhattan, where I was growing up as a 12-year-old outside of Manhattan, you can see the exact same craters on the moon, the same rings of Saturn, the same moons of Jupiter, the same phases of Venus. You can see the Andromeda Galaxy lies 2.5 million light years away from Earth. You can do that with that little thing. One that's a little more expensive. Get one that has a mount, and you could attach now your smartphone. What the hell is that? I wouldn't know what that was in 1984. And with that, you can do something that no other science, to my knowledge, can really replicate. Maybe biology and stuff, but you can experience the physical sensation that Galileo experienced when he turned a telescope like that to Jupiter and saw these 4 dots around it. Or that Saturn had ears, as he called it. Or that the moon was not crystalline, polished, smooth, and made of this heavenly substance, the quintessent substance, right? So where else can you be viscerally connected with the first person to ever make that discovery? Try doing that with the Higgs boson. Get yourself an LHC and smash together, high luminosity, call it Harry Cliff, and say, I want to replicate. How did you feel? He didn't feel anything. None of them felt anything. It took years to compile it. You can't do it. But with this, you can feel the exact same emotions.
That's fascinating. It's almost like maybe there's Another one like that is fire.
Yes.
Like when you build a bonfire, like you actually get it. See, if you use a lighter, I think if you actually, by rubbing sticks together or however you do it without any of the modern tools, that's probably what that's like.
Yeah.
And then you get to experience the magic of it, of what like early humans
Yes, you
conversations.
feel what Og felt when he did it that first time.
By the way, is this a gift?
This is a gift.
Yeah, is this
You need a
a
little bit of a swag upgrade, so that's why
But yeah, this is a. I'm pulling a Putin. Like, ask if this is a gift, making it very uncomfortable for you. Not really. This is
actually my childhood telescope here.
But now I'm keeping.
That's
All right.
So looking
yeah,
for this telescope
was when your love for
Change.
science was first born.
changed my life because not only was I doing that, I was replicating what Galileo did, but I was. I'm 100% not comparing myself to Galileo. Okay, if there's any confusion out there. But I did replicate exactly what he did, and I was like, holy crap, this is weird. Let me write it down. So it had another effect, which all good scientists, budding scientists should do, and all parents should do. Get your kid a book, a little notebook, take a pencil to it. Write down what you see, what you hypothesize, what you think it's going to be. Not like in the high school, like hypothesis, thesis, but just like, wow, how did I feel? Better yet, astronomy is a visual science. Sketch what you see. The Lagoon Nebula, the Pleiades, Seven Sisters. You can see them anywhere on Earth. And when you do that, again, you're connecting two different hemispheres of your brain, as I understand it, and you're connecting through your fingertips. You literally have the knowledge in your fingertips, in your connection between what you see, what you observe, and what you write down. Then you do research, right? The goal of science is not to just replicate what other people did. It's something new. And that's what we call research, and not just like studying, Wikipedia. And in so doing, you start to train a kid at age 12 or 13 for $50. It's unbelievable. And now we can do even better. Share it on Instagram, whatever, and you can, by doing so, have an entree into the world of what does it really mean to be a scientist, and do so viscerally. I often say, I was taught this by my English teacher, Mrs. Tompkins, in ninth grade, that the word educate, it doesn't mean to pour into. Let me pour in some facts into Lex. It's not like machine learning that you're just showing like billions of cats, or you're not like forcing it in, you bring it out. It means to pour out of in Latin, educare. And what more could a teacher want than to have something the kid is just like gushing? No, you're not going to see like
Inspire.
Yes.
Inspire.
Yeah.
Shout out to Mrs. Tompkins.
Yeah, Mrs. Tompkins. She's watching, yeah. She's a big fan. Me, she doesn't care about you.
Yeah, excellent. We take those we love for granted. This is in Manhattan.
This is in Westchester County, New York.
Got it. So but then that's where the dream is born.
Yeah.
But then there is the pragmatic journey of a scientist. So going to university, graduate school, postdoc, and all the way to where you are today. What's that? What are some notable moments in that journey?
So I call that the academic Hunger Games. Because it's like you're competing against like these people, who are just getting smarter all the time as you're getting smarter all the time. They want to get into a fewer and fewer number of slots. Like there's fewer slots to get into college than that in high school. There's fewer slots in graduate school. There's very fewer slots to be a postdoc, and many, maybe infinitesimal number. We just did a faculty search at UC San Diego. 400 applicants for one position. It's almost getting impossible. Like I almost can't conceive of doing what these new brilliant people applying to become an assistant professor at a state university what they're doing. It takes so much courage to do that. So I went from this kid in New York thinking I would never be a professional astronomer. A, because I didn't know any. I'd never seen any. I didn't even know that they existed. And I thought, who the hell's going to pay me to look at the stars? Like, will they pay me to do like an ice cream taster? Like, it's just not something I could conceive of getting paid to do, even if I had the brilliance to do it, which I feel I did. And then I went to graduate school, and during graduate school, I had this kind of on again, off again relationship with my father. And I knew that he was a mathematician. He had left and got remarried himself and moved across the country. I didn't see him for 15 years. And in that time, I learned a lot about him, and I learned that he had gotten very interested not in pure mathematics, which he had been a number theorist and contributed seminal work on the Diophantine equations, which play a role in Turing's work that you may have seen. But anyway, he had become interested, turned completely away from that into the foundations of quantum mechanics and relativity, which is physics. And by that time, I was at Brown University. And I was, thinking, oh, maybe I'll be a condensed matter physicist or experimentalist. I never thought I'd be a theorist, and I'm not a theorist, so it was pretty prescient. And but it always appealed to me, like, why not do what made me happy as a 12-year-old? Like, we often forget about like those, primitive things about us are probably the most sustainable, durable, and resilient attributes of our character. So with my own kids, I look like, what are they interested in now when they're young? And it doesn't mean that's what they're going to do. I mean, some of them want to play Fortnite, like professional Fortnite, which there are. But the odds of that is less than the odds of being a professor.
Can I ask you, is your father still with us?
No.
Just in a small tangent. Do you miss him? Do you think about him? Does his mathematical journey reverberate through who
You're
you are?
strange.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it did in very many ways. And he's been gone for a long time now.
That's
Thinking
what
back
memories
to
are
that
made.
time with him, he must have instilled some capacity for me to only want to spend
Oh,
my
people
time, which is a
changing.
limited quantity. I don't think it's the most limited quantity. Maybe we'll talk about that later. But to go into only the most challenging, interesting things with the limited time that we have in all their lives. And for him, it was the foundations of quantum mechanics. For me, it was the foundations of the universe and how did they come to be. And I felt like, well, people have been trying since Einstein to outdo
Let's see.
Einstein and made great progress in the foundations of quantum mechanics. But this is an exciting time. The Kobe satellite